Hello, this is Chris Bertelson with a quick clip from Nevada Learning Series. I want to show you how to work with pivot tables in Microsoft Excel 2010. One of the more powerful features ever added to Microsoft Excel is the pivot table. It allows you to take a long list of data and roll it up into a summary report. Here we have a long list of data, and this goes down 375 rows. And the questions we want to ask of this data are more than simply total by state or total by party. If we wanted to know that, we could do a simple sort and subtotal in a table. Instead, we want to compare and contrast by state, by party, by type. And to do that, we need to roll this up or aggregate it into a pivot table. So to insert a pivot table, we simply go to the ribbon and say Insert. Over Tables, we say Pivot Table, and it proposes a data range. We accept that. And now on the left, we see a layout of where our pivot table fields are going to appear in the report. And on the right, we see a list of those fields or column headings from that original data. To add those, we simply select it with a little check mark here. And now we've added date to our report. Now there are 4 different regions or areas of the report where this data can appear, and we see those listed down here at the bottom in this field list. I'm going to take the date field and move it up to be a column label. So I just drag and drop that with my mouse. And now it's across the top. We come up here and we add state, and it puts it in as a row label. I'm going to move that up and have that be a filter field up there. And then we'll add party and type. And you'll notice as I add these, it shows the actual data in the report, so I know right away if I'm on the right track. Finally, we'll add contributions, and that goes into the values field, and that's going to be the roll-up or the sum of all of the contributions. Now our pivot table is basically complete, but we're going to dress it up a little bit. Let's zoom in and add a little bit of color. If we come up here to the Pivot Table Tools tab, there's a design option up here where we can drop down the list and see all these different formats. And I think a nice blue would look easy on the eyes. You can also turn off some headings to make the columns fit a little bit better. So what do we have in our report? Well, across the top we have here the date by week listed up there. On the left we have our 2 main parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, each with their 4 types of fundraising, and with a subtotal, and a grand total down at the bottom. At the very top we have that state field where we can apply a filter by state. Now for me, rather than look at it by week, that's a little bit granular, I'd like to group that together. So I can select that field, come up here to my ribbon and say Group that field, and it's going to group it by month. We say OK, and now it's all been rolled up by month. Now if I want to take the big picture, the big view, I can go into Group Field, change that single parameter from months to quarters, say OK, and now it's all rolled up by quarters. Now every time I build one of these pivot tables, I still get a little bit of a thrill, because I can remember how difficult these reports were to do manually in the past. They were error prone and they were pretty fragile. Well, you saw how easily I created it with just a few check boxes and some drag and drops. I have not touched the keyboard to write any formulas. It's all inferred by the relationship of the fields. And next month, if a 5th type of fundraising gets added to that master list, I simply click on the Refresh Data button up here at the top, and that new data will automatically percolate up into the structure of my pivot table. Now if I want to do some layout and formatting on this pivot table, I can come up here to the Design tab and I could change the colors around if I wanted to do that. I can also change the report layout. We have up here a tabular form which puts the subtotals down at the bottom. We have an outline form which puts the subtotals up at the top. And I really like this compact form. That squeezes all the extra space out of a pivot table, and I get about 20-25% more information on a page. I also have the option of turning on and off the field headers and the little expanding buttons right there. Now these pivot tables are fairly dynamic. If I want to, I can double click and I can collapse or expand those headings as I see them there. If you're in a large pivot table, sometimes you lose the row and column headings as you scroll around and you lose track of what you're looking at. Now if you hover over any cell, a little tip will pop up to tell you exactly what value you're seeing. I call that GPS for pivot tables. So let's ask some questions of this data. How much did the Democrats raise? Well, that was 489. How about Republicans? That was 472. How much money was raised in backslapping? Well, that's a little harder to say because you'd have to add 133 and 123 to have the answer to that. Now maybe you could add those in your head, and maybe you know if you control-click on those separate cells, you can look in the status bar down at the bottom and see the sum of that. That's 257,000. But I don't want to just know it. I want to show it on the worksheet. I want to print it out in a report. And the trouble is, when we built this pivot table, we didn't anticipate this was going to be the question. But with an Excel pivot table, we can change our mind. All we have to do is come down here to the row labels field and drag and drop party underneath type. And instead of grouping by party and then type, now I'm grouping by type and then party. My whole pivot table has pivoted around and I can see the answer I want, 257 right there. Now let me do that again. That's so fun. Here we are grouping by party and then type, or we could drag party down, put type on top, and we're grouping the other way around. Or if we don't care about party, we could just drag and drop that field out of that box, and it removes it from the report, and we still see the answer we wanted up there of that 257,000. Maybe I want to filter for a particular state. I can drop down this filter up here, say I want to select different items, and we'll filter for Florida. Okay, so there's Florida's numbers listed right there. We can come back up here and display everything in that list. So we can do some pretty nice analysis right there by looking at this pivot table. Now I have another question. Which state did the most backslapping? Well, it's hard to tell with this view, but we can get there pretty easily. First of all, we're going to get rid of the date field. We don't need that, so I'll uncheck date. That's another way to remove them. And I'm going to take the type of fundraising and drag and drop it up here across the top on the columns. And we'll take the state and move it down here and list those on the rows. So now I have all my states listed on the left. All my backslappers are listed right here in this column. I simply look for the biggest number in that column and I have the answer. But it's easier than that because it turns out you can sort these pivot tables. So I put the cursor in there. I come up here and I say sort this largest to smallest. And the biggest number comes up to the top. And the most backslappers are in the great state of California. Now 38,680, that's a good number to know, but wouldn't it be great to know the details that went into that? Well, I can get those details by just selecting that cell, double-clicking in that pivot table, click, click, and it does an extract into a separate worksheet of all the backslappers from all parties, all dates in California. So as you can see, pivot tables are a very powerful tool for doing analysis in Excel 2010. This has been a quick clip from Nevada Learning Series, helping you get the most out of Microsoft Office.